Yasmin, you are a board certified family law attorney certified by Texas Board of Legal Specialization. You have practiced law for 25 years and you have a very strong litigation background with focus on high conflict divorce. Oh my God, that sounds like a trigger to me. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast. How are you doing today?
I'm good, Leena. First, I just wanted to say thank you so much for inviting me to be your guest.
Of course.
You are correct. I have been doing this for over 25 years. I do focus on high conflict divorce and got my start in New York, actually doing consumer fraud litigation, investigating white collar fraud. And then when I moved to Texas in 2010, I started doing family law and practice just took off since then.
Right. So I'm going to ask you about high conflict divorce because I know there are lots of those out there. But tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, like how are you from, who are you, and how did you come here?
So I am a daughter of immigrants from Pakistan.
Okay.
My parents came in the 1960s. I was born in the United States. I grew up in Illinois and I was sat for the bar in Illinois and then I moved to New York and got licensed in New York. And then I moved to Texas in 2010. I have a litigation background and just got involved with family law and realized there was a need. There's not very many South Asian family law attorneys, I would say, in the state of Texas. There's more now, but not very many, like a handful of us. And there's very few that are board certified.
Okay.
And board certification means I have a lot of litigation experience. I've tried cases. I do my best to try to settle cases. And I have a fairly large clientele that are South Asian. So I think people connect with me from my background.
Wow. So I was telling a friend of mine about you being on the guest, one on the show. And a couple of questions that I was, asked to ask is prenups and also ask about the infidelity clause that's in there as well. So we're going to get to that.
Okay.
And I felt that, Yasmin's expertise really fit in with the format of Romance Overdose because we do talk about modern day relationships. And I'm sure in your expertise, when you are, high conflict divorce, itni dafa use kar chuke hain already, we're like, 5 minutes into the show. So tell me about what do you see out there when people are coming in, this high conflict divorce situation? What kind of craziness do you see out there?
There's two components to a divorce. I think the first component is fighting over children and the other component is property division. And I think that people have a lot of misconceptions about what does it mean to be the primary parent in a custody battle and what is actually going to get divided in the marital estate, community marital estate in a divorce. And I don't know if you want me to speak to clients that come from South Asian backgrounds or just across the board.
I think South Asian backgrounds because, a lot of people who watch the show and who are on my followers list are South Asians. So I think that would be great if you can, talk with respect to them.
I will. And there's two things I kind of want to say about this. And there's positives on both sides. For my female South Asian clients, one thing that what is hard to see is the lack of financial transparency when these clients come in my door to talk about, do they know anything about the financial estate? Do they know how much their spouse makes? Do they know what the retirement is? Is there a will? Is the house paid off? There's a lack of transparency. A lot of the Desi spouses, the male spouses, do not disclose that information to their the other side, what I'd like to say for my Desi men clients that are the husbands, when they file for divorce, I don't think the wives realize how many rights the fathers get in the custody battles. They get a lot of time with their children, even if they're not going to be the primary parent. They get significant periods of possession. They have a lot of say in how the children are going to be raised. And I think a lot of times all those rights. So there's pros and cons on both sides is what I see.
Wow. I like what you mentioned about women being kind of unaware about the financial situation. I was just watching one of these videos by Dave Ramsey, and he had a caller who came in and he was talking about that and they were not South Asians, and he was telling them that his wife does not know how much he makes, and he has started making a lot of money, and the reason he hasn't told his wife is because she's going to start spending a lot of money, and he doesn't know how to actually tell her that he's gotten a raise because he doesn't want to tell her at the same time. And Ramses, because they don't really understand, where the Asian culture is coming from, they were like really flabbergasted. He actually said that this is that you have not disclosed everything in your finances to your spouse. What do you think about that?
I can say a couple of things about it. The first is, regardless of how segregated you keep your finances, whether you're the husband or the wife, it's all going to come out in the divorce. Legally speaking, you have to turn all that over.
Right.
So, and I think it's okay if one person is in charge of the finances, but the other person needs to know, hey, when I look at the tax return and I sign off on it, this is what the adjusted gross income is. Hey, this is what the mortgage balance on the house is. This is where we keep the will. This is what's going to happen if somebody dies. These are the passwords to the bank accounts. There needs to be some, even if someone's be in charge, both people need to know what's going on financially. And it's a little, and I think that that needs to change.
Wow. So we will have a lot of questions, which जो कि हमारे, especially हमारा जो cultural है, the way the men are trained, the way the women are trained, the old school way of thinking, उसके बारे में हम बात करेंगे. But we're going to start off because you see so many divorces, and I'm sure that, you are not a therapist, but somewhere you're analyzing all the data. So let me ask you that, looking at all that data, what does a healthy relationship look like?
So, Leena, that's a really great question. I've had hundreds of people walk through the door in my office seeking divorce. And I think, in my experience, a healthy relationship is one that focuses on stability over volatility. And what I mean by that is, don't knock routine. Sharing dinner together, cooking a meal together, cleaning up the dishes afterwards, idle chit-chat versus figuring out the next reservation at a fancy restaurant. What vacation am I going to take? It's that day-to-day monotony and routine that's really important. You need to be able to enjoy that as well as the other stuff too. I think that's a big component. I think independence versus codependence. So what I mean by that is being able to do things on your own and also doing things with your partner and not being totally enmeshed with everything that your partner's doing and having that separation. I think another important issue would be another good component of a healthy relationship is how you handle fights. However you fight, that you figure out a way to resolve it and not put your partner on a pedestal or not be disappointed with your partner. Don't idealize your partner. The other three, I would say there's three key components that if I was to simplify a healthy relationship, and that would be friendship with your partner, affection, and also sexual. And I think affection and sexual intimacy are two separate components. You need all three and a balance to really have a good relationship.
Wow. And you threw in a lot of big fat psychology terms like codependency and independence and volatile relationships and stability. I do see this around me quite a lot, is that the routine build, sometimes it gets like mundane. It's like the same thing every day. You wake up at the same time, you're going to the gym, you're doing your smoothie, then you're doing but that becomes very boring for a lot of people I see, because maybe they're like more accustomed and used to drama or excitement, or maybe they've had like 2 decades of a single life where they're dating all these people and a lot of travel and eating out, and suddenly you have a husband and it turns boring within 6 months.
I think there's a balance between kind of monotony and routine and doing special things like going out and going on vacation and going to a special restaurant. You don't want to run into the problem of parallel lives where you're both going to the gym, but you're not really interacting, and you're both eating dinner together, but not really talking. It's about cooking a meal together and like maybe, cooking up some recipe and like really sitting down at the table without your smartphones and not looking at the television and talking and engaging with each other. That's what I mean. There is the monotony of a relationship sprinkled with other things that you can do to spice it up, but also when you're doing the boring things, actually interacting and engaging with your partner.
Yeah, when you're doing the boring things, actually interacting and aging with your partner. I love it. I totally. So if you have just joined in on the show, we have Yasmin, who is a board-certified family law attorney, certified Texas Board of Legal Specialization, and she has been practicing law for 25 years, and now she focuses on high conflict divorce. She has a strong litigation background as well. And she's here in the studios in Romance Overdose trying to answer these relationship questions based on all the experience, all the cases that she's seen. Is it exciting, like what you do, or does it come to a point where the conflict, because you're handling divorce cases, the conflict like gets to you? And because for me, I remember that movie came out, Chalte Chalte, with Shah Rukh Khan and Ani Mukherjee, and they wouldn't just fighting. And halfway through the movie, I'm like, can you please just end this misery? Just kill each other, just get out of here. I cannot even put up with this.
You have to have a strong constitution to do this kind of work. I think that it's very important to be patient and empathetic. And I feel that, yes, it's really hard. It's really hard. And going back to the original question on a healthy relationship, tying into what you're asking me, relationships are really hard. It is very hard. There are points in a marriage where people are going to have really rough times and points in the marriage where things are going to be really good. It's like a cycle, and it goes up and down. And some people can compromise and make it through, and other people can't, and they check out and they end up filing for divorce. And so I think understanding the reasons for why a person is deciding to seek a divorce and being empathetic and listening helps, but it's really hard. It's very taxing to listen to the problems constantly on a day-to-day basis. And it takes a special kind of somebody with thick skin who can also be empathetic to really help client navigate their way through the divorce.
Right. Wow. I just thought, I'm like, because I always think about therapists. I was like, who do they go for therapy? Because they're listening to everybody's like problems, what's going on.
I think it's important to actually get into therapy when you're going through a divorce. I have great people that I refer clients to all the time.
Okay.
I think sometimes children need individual counseling. The parents need counseling. I think sometimes family therapy is important. It's really hard. But you know what? People are resilient. And most of the time when I check back in with a client post-divorce, they have reinvented themselves, moved on, and they're happy it's over.
Wow. So that brings us to the next question, which is going to lead us to our third and the fourth question as well. It's all the same thing. It's really controversial. We're going to start by talking about monogamy. Do you think it's natural, or is it like something that's been imposed upon us by society and religion and culture?
That is a controversial topic. From my perspective, I think it's important to look at the longevity of humans. If you look back even 200 years ago, people died a lot younger. Women died often during childbirth. People married in their teen years, were farmers, had lots of children. Some of the children didn't survive. People were lucky to make it into their 50s and 60s.
Right.
Now, today, people can easily live into their 90s. So when you look at this in that context, I think it's unrealistic to think that people on the whole can be expected to be monogamous in a marriage for its entire duration. I just think it's very, very rare. It's a cultural construct, and it's been idealized throughout all around the world. And I think you can expect people, what I think you can expect people to do is maybe serial monogamy, which is, I will be faithful to you in this relationship until such time as we break up or divorce or I meet someone else. And I think what's more realistic is being that a committed couple let the other partner know, hey, this is anymore. I am thinking about meeting with somebody else. I'm tempted, and actually leaving the relationship before you actually have the affair is actually a better way to go about it, if possible, and more realistic, and not actually cheat on the partner. But I do think, to answer your question, that it is, I think it's not easy to be monogamous for a 70-year-long marriage. That's my response to you.
I really love the perspective that, there was a time like the marriages would be like 20 years, 25 years, 30 years because, we die. But now it's like we see people celebrating 50th anniversary, 60th anniversary. Like, whoa, how did you even do this? How can you put up with this? Do you think that maybe because coming from like a South Asian background, now things have changed. Last 10 years, 15 years, you can say things have drastically changed. But there was to keep it going forever. Like, in Bollywood movies, you always get to hear this dialogue, ki ab is ghar se tumhari arti niklegi. Like, the only way you leave this house or leave this man is when you die. So that's our DNA somewhere. Do you think it's that is actually contributing to longer marriages and people being monogamous and them suppressing their wills, or maybe them even cheating and nobody finding out?
I think that, if you're talking to the South Asian community, if you look at some of the data, I believe that the divorce rate in Pakistan and India is less than 1%. And in the United States, across the board, divorce is about 50%.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's good or bad. I think what it speaks to is the culture that says you need to stay at all costs in the marriage. And I think you still see that even here and now with immigration and second and third generations. There is a strong commitment and a cultural value towards staying in the marriage till death do you part. Is that practical? Not always. Sometimes there's physical abuse, emotional abuse, there's infidelity, and there's really valid reasons for someone to feel like they can leave a marriage and they should be allowed to leave a marriage. But I do think because of the culture and religious beliefs and other things, a lot of people stay and they stay. So you see in Desi culture, lots of people in long-term marriages. Are they happy? I don't know. You know, is it fulfilling? I don't know. So
Yeah, maybe a lot of people are not really taking that risk of going out there, maybe starting all over again. That's scary too. You're in it. It's comfortable. This is what you know.
Yes.
It feels like home. And then log kya kahenge, it's like one of like the biggest, you know, the super hit movie of all times in Desi culture is log kya kahenge, because everyone's worried about what everyone else is going to say.
You know, and I'd like to say people often think, oh, well, I'm a divorce lawyer. This is what I'm going to say. I'm all for people trying to save their marriages and work on their relationships. I think it involves counseling, sitting down, having hard conversations, figuring out what's broken, having financial transparency. But when all that stuff fails, a woman or a man should feel like they can leave if they have to. And it's okay. It's not a sign of complete failure. It's not, you know, a feeling that you're going to be rejected by the community. I wish there was more support and people leaning in so women and men could feel like it's not just women, men too, can feel like they can actually get a divorce and it's not the end of the world.
Wow. Yeah, it's really not the end of the world, but somehow we seem to think so. And I like how you phrase it that, you know, if people can work it out, great. But if they cannot, they should be get out of this. Stats back home are 1%. Wow.
Yeah.
And here it's like, it's 50%. Wow. Like maybe like a century apart, something like that.
Yeah.
You know, if we look back the divorce stats here in the US, maybe a century back.
Well, it's interesting. I think the divorce rate is slowly decreasing here, but I think that's also because the younger generation often don't want to get married or they wait a really long time. The priorities and the culture is a little bit different with the younger generation.
Right.
So I think some of the data change over the next decade or so, depending on, you know, where things kind of go. In the
Right.
future. Yeah.
Yeah, I know a lot of youngsters who are like, what's the point? You know, it's like point. And those who still go ahead and tie the knot despite all this data out there, well, you guys are pretty brave. We were watching this show, The Gilded Age, and that's New York in the 1890s, and a woman getting divorced, even if it's man committed infidelity, would not be invited to you know, their soirees and their parties, and she would be, you know, kind of like excommunicated. Then there is a change about that's happening it's set in New York, and there's a change about, you know, there's a really progressive woman, and she's like, no, I'm going to invite all the divorcees. I don't care, just because the daughter of the most influential woman is getting divorced. So it's not that they can have a party without her. So they started including her, and they started including everything as well. So there is acceptance, women who are divorced. Wow, we've come a long way.
Yeah.
It's scary, right?
Yeah, and it goes across all cultures, not just South Asian culture.
Right.
You know, and I do think things are a little bit better. I do see clients coming in that are filing for divorce and not staying in marriages. I see more and more dual income households where the women are working just as hard as the spouses are working, and they are able to financially extricate themselves from a bad marriage and actually financially independent. It's not the end of the world. So that's good. It's important, you know, for someone not to feel financially trapped in the marriage as well.
Right. Absolutely. My next question is, we talked about monogamy, and now we're going to talk about cheating. Now, I love how I have actually, I'm going to read the entire question out, because what actually counts as cheating in the age of DMs, emotional affairs, and OnlyFans? Like, there was a time we didn't have it available like at a click. Now it is.
I would say, as a divorce lawyer, from a legal perspective, for it to be for cheating in the case, you have to prove that the spouse actually had a sexual relationship with a third party. However, saying that, I think that with the dawn of social media, an emotional affair is just as destructive as a sexual affair. And that covers using social media to, and FaceTime by sexting, exchanging inappropriate, provocative photos or videos. Dialogue is of a physical affair. Now, it could vary from a judge to a judge, depending on how graphic the exchanges between the two people on, using social media, never actually even meeting in person. But it is absolutely equivalent to a regular affair, in my opinion, when people get into these fantasy relationships using social media constructs.
Right. I like how you say these are actually not real relationships. These are fantasy relationships. Yes. So do you feel that they have like infiltrated in our marriages so much that they are affecting the marriages because you're seeing the stats?
I think that yes, I think it's probably I think with an iPhone and FaceTime and everything, Instagram, you can engage in a relationship with somebody, never meet them in person, and actually be, basically destroying your relationship with the person that you're with. Absolutely. So, and I see that Facebook affairs. You go and you dig up somebody from high school or college and you start messaging them, and all of a sudden then you get on a phone and you start FaceTiming, and then yes, it can ruin your relationship. You have to, if you're committed in your relationship, maybe not go down that road, or you could be coming to my office to file for a divorce, or your spouse could be,
Right. So because these temptations have become readily available and they're everywhere, do you feel as well that we need to be also more, how do I say it, more tolerant of these? Because I remember in my 20s, one of my best friends, she would be upset at her boyfriend because he would just like look at a girl, because women can be. And I would tell her, it's like, I mean, he's with you. He's been with you, supposed to get engaged. You've been planning everything instead of him. And he just looks at her like this, and you're like, okay, all upset. So I told her to be tolerant about it. But now I'm thinking, should I have or should I not? Because then eventually if we magnify that 20 years down, this is what it comes down to.
Well, I'm going to say a couple of things, and one of them might be kind of controversial. I mean, there's engaging in a online relationship with someone where you're interacting, maybe doing inappropriate things, sending inappropriate things, versus maybe like looking at inappropriate sites for, sexual gratification. And that's common. That's on every iPhone, iPad, online. Men, women, whoever. I think people do tolerant of that. There's a difference between looking at something or looking at good-looking, attractive people on Instagram and just scrolling through, and actually engaging one-on-one with somebody using social media.
Okay.
I think there's a difference between that. So I think you can look the other way if people are just kind of having fun, but I think you can't look the other way if you're actually having a relationship online with one person and sending inappropriate things of yourself to that person and back. So I would say there's a you can draw a distinction.
Right.
Yeah.
So it's like one is like a one-sided thing,
yes,
and one is actually like happening between two people.
A two-way street.
Right.
That's a great way of explaining
right.
it. Yeah.
Right. You did earlier about before one cheats, it's instead of committing cheating, one should actually go and talk to your partner and tell them it's not working out and their temptations. Maybe a lot of people who are watching this are going through that. How does one do that? I know it's not your area of expertise, but because you have all the data and you've seen all these cases, and what's the worst that can come out of it? You actually practice that in your when you are, representing your clients and they're getting divorced, and many times it could be because of cheating.
For some reason, I think it's really hard for people to do what I just suggested. I think what ends up happening is they go ahead, have that affair, and then it all comes out, and then the person files for divorce. I think it's maybe the person being in denial about the actual state of their own relationship with their spouse, and they just don't want to face up to that, and instead they kind of lash out by having an affair, where it would be better just tell the person, hey, this is not working out. I can't do this anymore. And maybe you go to marriage counseling, give it a shot. And then if it doesn't work out, file for divorce or separate or break up. Maybe you're not married, you're just in a relationship with someone, and then go ahead and pursue the other relationship, out in the open. And it's not a big secret and you're not doing anything wrong or hurting the other person.
Right.
That's an idealized way kind of thought about it in my head. Does it actually happen that way? No. But it'd be great if people could maybe think about it from that angle.
Right. We're just complicated, right? I think it's got to do a lot with us trying to test something else out and see if that works before we let this one go.
Probably. Yeah. That's probably true. And people are scared. You're used to being with this one person in your social construct, in your home with your kids, your day-to-day monotony and the routine. It's scary to let all that go. I mean, it is. It's human nature, I think, to hang on to routine.
Yeah, it can be a pretty scary place as well because, you are hoping it's never going to be found out.
Yeah.
But the spouse always finds out. I mean, why do people even imagine the spouse is not going to find out?
Well, and either they find out or the spouse starts, the non-cheating spouse senses that the other partner has checked out of the relationship.
Right.
Because normally when that happens, they do check out because it's difficult to be with two people at the same time, in my opinion.
Right.
So the other spouse starts to suspect, and their instincts are probably correct. So,
Right. Yeah. And we do have a question about being in love with two people at the same time. So we see a lot of love triangles in Bollywood. So is it possible to love two people at the same time? Or it's just that there's a code that says if you love the first one, you would have never fallen in love with the second one?
I think that, in my opinion, my opinion would be that you can always love the person that you're with, but not be in love with them anymore. I think you can only really be in love with one person at a time. So if you are in two different relationships, you're probably only in love with one of the two, but you love the other person. Maybe it's from longevity. You guys grew up together, you had children together, and there's like a respectful love that you have for that person that you'll always have for that person, but you're really only in love with one of the two people. That's my opinion.
Wow. I love it. So, back to our Desi households, there is this taboo about sharing your intimate feelings. Like, we were talking earlier about, if you're getting temptations, go and talk to your spouse about it, go to therapy about it. And before you cheat, get a divorce, do it the right way. So, no one gets hurt. But hamare culture mein, it's even difficult to talk about your true feelings, like what you're really feeling, what you're not liking about the relationship, starting off even there. And especially for men, you're being vulnerable, you're showing your true feelings. We're supposed to hide them and deep hidden inside. There's this very famous, oh my God, all this poetry that I talk about on the shows. It's like everything is, telling us that, don't share your feelings. This is Ahmad Faraz, mana ke mohabbat ka chupana hai mohabbat. That means even when you're loving someone, you're going to hide those feelings because that is an expression of love. I do not know why, but that's where we're coming from.
Now, I don't know if in South Asian culture, because of British colonialism, we picked up on Victorian cultural traits, which is to suppress everything, not be emotional, not be as affectionate as people are in other cultures. So I'm not sure if that's from British colonialism or if that's just part of our culture.
Right.
But it's not, I think it's not just men, it's women. I think that lots of families, public displays of affection are not often seen. You're taught to be quiet and take it and not express your emotions, whether it's men or women. And it is important to move away from that and actually feel like you can express your emotions. It's okay to cry at a funeral. It's okay to be devastated about something or a job loss or a diagnosis, a medical diagnosis, and share that with your children, with your spouse, and not feel afraid. But yeah, there is definitely cultural pressure to not express emotion. And I think it can hurt too if your spouse is bottling up inside, not being expressive, not being affectionate, not being loving. I think it emotionally deprives the partner. And yes, it can lead to a lot of unhappiness in the relationship, whether or not the parties decide they want to file for divorce.
Right. Do you see cases where they wanted to get divorced, but they ended up not getting it?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
Oh, yes. Well, and it's for various reasons. I have clients who've come in, hired me. We've gone halfway through the litigation. And I want to say, and it's not a bad thing, South Asian culture involves family members. A lot of times almost all the time, I have a potential new client come in with an aunt, uncle, parent, brother, sister, cousin, relative. They usually are consulting and conferring with family members throughout the entire divorce process. And as part of that, so the positive is they get a lot of community support. The negative is a lot of times there's pressure from outside factors and relatives and people telling the person, you got to stay. You got to stay, don't do it, don't. People that back out or non-suit their divorce or change their mind. Now, whether that's good or bad, I'm not going to judge them for that.
Okay.
But that does happen.
Okay. And that is because of like all these, all these things are telling you have to do it a certain way. Just because they lived through a bad marriage for 50 years, you have to as well. I see that as, there's a lot of pressure on the younger generation. Last week we were talking about, with a group of 20-year-olds, how they were talking about that they are not going to go through with marriage plans if the other person does not agree to do a prenup. And because prenup offers protection. And then my question is, then where's the love then? What are we talking? Why are we even getting married? But okay, I'm kind of old school when it comes to this. But then at the same time, they brought up like the infidelity clause that, that needs to be there, because if he does this or if she does this, then they need to kind of pay for it. What do you think about all this? What is this?
Well, I would say a couple of things. I do a lot of prenups, and I've actually been doing more and more for younger couples, and I do a lot of them for South Asian couples. I think there's a couple of things. It's a controversial topic. Both parties have some assets that are significant. Maybe you each have assets worth over $500,000 each, and you're both, I don't know, you're both physicians, or you're partners at law firms, or waited a little bit longer to get married. I do think I see the sense and practicality in signing off on a premarital agreement. You can negotiate and put in whatever you want in it and be pretty creative with them. I think that the problem is that, and I also think that statistically, I believe across the board in the U.S., there's not that many people that necessarily file for divorce if they've executed a prenup. So maybe there's something to be said about that.
Oh, wow.
And
Can you say that again?
I believe there's statistics that show that the people that execute, there's not a higher incident of people filing for divorce because they've executed a premarital agreement.
Oh, wow.
So it's a thoughtful process, and it takes into account a lot of different things. Prenups are not completely foolproof either. But I do think if you have some assets, it's something to consider. But if you don't have, neither party has an asset, and they're getting married and they're in love and they decide not to do something like a premarital agreement, that's okay too. So I'm not sure if I really answered your question.
No,
or
you
not.
did. But what is the infidelity clause?
You can insert a clause into a premarital agreement that says that and negotiate terms, and that you will get nothing or some amount or a lesser amount if one of the other party commits infidelity during the marriage. You can negotiate that as a contractual agreement.
Wow.
So, and I've seen it done, and I've seen it happen. So,
wow.
You could literally end up with nothing. I mean, it depends on how you negotiate what you're putting into the contract.
Okay.
It's a contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. Wow, that's really interesting. I do that more and more younger people are getting into it, because like I heard this guy saying that because she wouldn't sign a prenup, I decided not to proceed and get married. Then at the same time, there is this expectation, especially in the South Asian culture, that, nowadays the independent women there are like at par with men when it comes to finances and making a living. But then there's a lot of times where the man is supposed to take care of the majority of the financial burden of the household. How does that play out in divorce court, especially when he's done it for over like 20 years and now they're getting divorced? And
so divorce is different in every state in the United States of America. And I will say that Texas is probably one of the worst states in the U.S. to get divorced in if you're the non-earning spouse. There's no real alimony. You're basically taking the assets and dividing it in half. So whatever's there, you divide it up. If that's earned during the marriage. And basically anything else, like if you need to get your kids' college tuition paid for, or you want to get some post-divorce maintenance, it's very, very difficult to get those things, if not possible. I'll just kind of say that generally speaking. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Yeah, yeah. So it's because it's a Republican state, or
No, I think it's a community state. Few states in the U.S. that are community property states. It basically just says you take everything you earn, doesn't matter who earned it, is community property during the marriage, and you take it, you minus out the liabilities, and you just divide it in half.
right?
So if you have a large estate, it works out great. When you have a smaller estate and just say the earning spouse is a partner at a law firm and you were the stay-at-home mom and you only saved up $100,000 in the marriage, that's 50-50 and that's it. The spouse is going to go ahead and keep earning a lot of money being a partner at a law firm, but the non-earning spouse who's a housewife and maybe been out of the job force for 12 years has to start from scratch.
Wow.
And so that's what makes it really hard. So
Right.
I always say keep your day job, regardless of who you are when you get married in Texas.
Oh, wow. You know what? I really feel, Yasmin, you should be like a motivational speaker, man, because of all the experience and, everything that you have learned. Because I think, and what I've learned from what you have shared your experience here is, you are working with both the partners in such a deep way. You're not only understanding the law, you're understanding their emotions, and then their counseling, and their families are involved as well. You should have like a TikTok. You should be like out there online, like Sadia Psychology or something like that, talking about it.
Thank you.
Yeah. And especially that bit that you said in the beginning about, women, how they are, trained, just to blindly trust, and they do not have a lot of transparency when it comes to the household, the financial matters. वो women खासतौर पे जो immigrate करके आई हैं, from back home in India और Pakistan, वहाँ तो इसका कोई concept ही नहीं होता, वहाँ तो like maybe हक में लिखा जाएगा, maybe not. And also those who are, being raised by these parents who are not so aware, they need to learn all this.
Yeah, and I think it's important to it's okay to ask questions and know what's going on with the household finances. If your spouse chooses to not make you in charge or you're not involved with paying the bills, that's okay too, but then know what the bills are. Find out what the mortgage balance is. Find out look at the tax return if you're signing off on it, and just look at what's being shown on the paperwork and just jot it down in your head and have an idea of what's going on, and have conversations with your spouse. Hey, I'd like to get a little bit more involved. Do it slowly. It doesn't have to be all at once, but I think it's fair, and women should feel like they can have that transparency. Even if the other spouse stays in charge of the bills, know what the estate is comprised of. So
that's amazing. Thank you so much for being on Romance Overdose, the podcast, where all these controversial questions that I have, I am so glad that we have women like Yasmin out there who will agree to it and actually be excited by the questions. Thank you so much. Yeah.
You're welcome. And thank you for having me on the show. And if anyone ever wants to come find me, they can find me at www.kgkfamilylaw.com.
Okay. Let's include that again. In fact, I'm going to put it on the screen as well, so people can, reach out to you, and your phone number, your email address. Can you share that as well? So
yes, my phone number is 281-598-6520, and the website again is www.kgkfamilylaw.com, and you can also find me on TikTok at Desi Girl Attorney.
Desi Girl Attorney. I've seen you. Of course I've seen you. Okay, so once again, Yasmin, who is in the studios with us, is a board-certified family law attorney, certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization, and she has practiced law for over 25 years, and she has a strong litigation background with a focus on high-conflict divorce. I hope and I pray this time doesn't come in your life, but when it does, you need someone who is strong and who knows how to get you out of this. Thank you, Yasmin.
Thanks.
Take care.